Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. The war on cops, that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. It was inevitable. Whenever you have a media frenzy, things are going to get dicey for those under scrutiny. Racially charged shootings all over America have received enormous coverage on television, with certain liberal cable news programs hammering American police agencies over and over again. Rioting and looting are big stories, and all the carnage is now filtering down to young Americans, influencing how some of them interact with police. Case in point. Last Friday evening, a troubling event took place in a suburb of Dallas. About 130 teenagers, most of them black, showed up to a pool party, overwhelming the security which was in place at that party. About 7 p.m., the McKinney Police Department was called, citing a disturbance. Additional calls rolled in, saying there was fighting, general chaos. Police officers quickly arrived and began trying to impose order on the scene. But that did not turn out very well. After the fracas, one McKinney police officer, Corporal David Casebolt, was suspended. He was the man who drew his gun and threw the young girl to the ground. One adult male was arrested on charges of interfering with the police. Nobody was seriously hurt. But video of the incident has now gone worldwide, again casting a giant shadow over American policing. Some people believe that cops in general are oppressors, especially towards people of color. The 15-year-old who took this video you are watching right now seems to be one of them.
I was scared that someone was going to get shot and possibly killed. I was like one of the few Caucasian people at the party, so I think it might have had something to do with racism.
But other witnesses see it differently and are criticizing those who are condemning the police.
They didn't see the kids running all over the place, not complying with the officers. They didn't see them cussing the police officers, becoming unruly to them.
What I did see before the cameras or the video started going is that teens jumping over the fence after security were telling them they can't come in to swim, not because they were black, it's because they didn't live in the community itself.
The truth is that some of the kids involved in the pool party obviously didn't comply with police commands. They did not hit the ground. They did not stop arguing with the officers. Now, that doesn't justify brutal behavior, and Talking Points is not going to try the case on TV. But it's clear that there is a growing disrespect for police officers in some American neighborhoods, and that attitude is going to lead to violence. If citizens don't obey the police, then law and order completely breaks down. The authorities have the power to compel us, the private citizens, to act in a certain manner. If the cops are wrong, that should be taken up later. But with TV news demonizing police officers, the law enforcement contract we all have starting to break down. Talking Point sees big trouble on the horizon. Trouble that is being fueled by hysterical media. Anti-police zealots are given wide latitude to spew their hatred and irresponsible ravings. That kind of rhetoric sinks in. Finally, and this is only my opinion, the McKinney police officer who was suspended should not have drawn his firearm. He was not in any danger, and neither was any civilian. He simply overreacted, and in doing so made this an international story. But cops are human too, and in the heat of conflict, bad things are going to happen. Every decent person should understand that. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction joining us from Cleveland, Keen Tony, retired Canton, Ohio police sergeant, now runs a law enforcement consulting firm. Here in New York City, Jonathan Gilliam, former FBI agent and Navy SEAL, who also consults for police agencies. Mr. Gilliam, do you believe respect for police in general is dropping in America?
I think it's absolutely apparent, and I think when you have what you've talked about for the longest time about parenting, when you have the one parent or the parent of the one girl who was really the most disrespectful coming out and playing the race card, what you see is a direct correlation between her behavior and his behavior. And that's the first part of this. The second part is that the community itself is not respecting law enforcement. When you look at the NAACP coming out, and I don't know how they still have this, but for the advancement of color people, and instead of coming out and saying something that advances them by saying, listen, young people, if you're of color, stand up and be known for somebody who's upright and respectful. They don't do that. They come out there and now they're playing the game again to blame the police, and that again just burns this into the community that they don't have to respect law enforcement.
All right, Mr. Tony, how do you see it?
Yeah, I do have to agree. There has been a change in the attitude regarding police in some minority communities across the country. It's unfortunate. We support the police. I support the police when they do right. But when they do wrong, the police have got to be held accountable to a higher standard because of the position they have. With that said, most limitations that have occurred that have led to the position that we have now in the situation have been brought forward by decisions that the police made, right or wrong, in a split second. Those decisions can be reviewed for years or decades by institutions such as the Supreme Court. We have got to realize the police are here. The vast majority are fine, outstanding men and women.
Yeah, and mistakes are made, as I said, everybody's a human being. But if you're going to have an attitude in certain precincts in America that the cops are oppressors, they're bad, you shouldn't respect them, you should give them a hard time, then you're going to have conflict. Now let's take the police officer who was suspended. Sure. Would you have drawn your gun in that circumstance, Mr. Gilliam?
Well, it's interesting because we're now talking about the officer last out of all this.
Well, I wanted to get the bigger, set the table
and
here.
So what we have here is an officer that showed up at 80–90%. I don't think it should have had gotten to the point where he drew his weapon, but I can't judge him because I don't know what threat he was feeling. What's important to realize is that this officer, when he drew his weapon, he drew it and had it at the ready. He didn't go pointing it at everybody saying, I'm going to shoot you. That's true,
but there doesn't seem to be any imminent threat. It seems to be chaos. Mr. King, would you have, Mr. Tony, would you have drawn your weapon?
No, I would not have.
Okay.
The threat was not there.
Mr. Tony, if the girl was disrespectful, didn't get on the ground, and she didn't, I don't know whether she cursed the officers, but certainly other kids did, how would you have treated that?
Well, I think that, first of all, if we look at this video, the start of the video shows another officer who was actually communicating very well with the teenagers present. Then we have the corporal. It's not unusual for people to get loud, obnoxious, swear at the police, and not to comply. But in the case with the young lady, once she was compliant, she was seated on the ground. The officer disengages her and goes after the two that took off on foot, goes back to her, and that's when he actually laid hands on her, put her face down.
Right. Now, is he going to be punished for that, or is that a legitimate technique? Because the girl clearly did not want to be on the ground.
Right. I think that, and I think the department took the right steps. They did suspend him.
All right, so you're not saying that was, are you saying that the police officer, was that a legitimate thing? If a person doesn't go on the ground when ordered, you can force them to the ground?
Sure, in certain circumstances. I think he showed up there with the attitude that there was some real violent crime going on there, and so his actions were like that, but he didn't triage the situation. And I think
I don't know what that means.
That means he didn't look at it like in the hospital. He didn't look at it and assess it and then react. He just got there and started reacting.
Do you think he overreacted? I
think he overreacted.
All right, and you do too, Mr. Tony.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Okay. You know, now, let me just play devil's advocate. I only have a minute left.
Okay.
You've got 150 kids. And if you're a police officer in the middle of that chaos and you're being disrespected and don't show power and authority, that situation can get a lot worse, could it not, Mr. Tony?
It could, but disrespect is one thing. You know, what officers have got to realize is, first thing is, recognize a threat for what it is. When I speak with departments, I tell them to think about, is it a stick or is it a snake? Our bias, Our fear will make us see things incorrectly,
All right.
and we'll
But remember
overreact.
the numbers of kids involved. Last word, Mr. Gilliam.
As long as they're walking away, it doesn't matter if they're disrespectful. As long as they're doing what you tell them. You tell them to go away.
But they didn't do what he told them. They wouldn't get on the ground.
Some of them did, but some of them didn't.
But
And
what do you do with the ones who won't do what you say?
well, that's when the coordinated attack by the police officers, I say attack, but a coordinated fashion by the police officers going to handle the situation is what is necessary. And I think there needs to be more training in law enforcement to realize
So you
this.
would diffuse, both of you would diffuse rather
Absolutely.
than confront in something like this.
This happens every day in most places.
All right, gentlemen, very interesting. Thank you very much. Next on the
Thank you.
rundown, the New